not, but there is a video going around showing teachers scooping cash off of the ice at a game to help pay for schooling supplies.
Oh, I believe absolutely. Yeah.
Kind of disgusting that we put our teachers
to do that.
It is, I know, exactly.
Was that on a YouTube?
Yeah, it's been in the news too.
Okay.
We're
lucky to have people willing to teach. And thank you, Claude.
Absolutely. Yep. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have very high respect for the teachers that do this as their vocation every single day. It's just tremendous what they do.
Yeah, true.
Yep.
There's the birthday boy or man.
It is. Yes, he is.
Happy birthday.
Yep.
Hello, Chris. Happy birthday.
Thanks.
Happy birthday.
I can't believe it. I was saying that, I think I said it to James, the only really good thing about the pandemic is that it slows down time, because otherwise time is getting quicker and quicker. So it kind of evens out. Is that right?
I would imagine so. Yes.
Yeah.
All right, Council, we're going to go ahead and get started this evening. It is 5:30. Welcome everybody to the City Council study session for December 13th, 2021. We'll call this meeting to order. For public participation, this meeting is being held both in person and virtually, with the City Council members meeting virtually this evening. Teresa, will you please call the roll?
Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Here.
Councilmember Baggett.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember J. Raj.
I'm here.
Councilmember Malinga.
Here.
Councilmember Stearns.
Here.
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Here.
Thank you. I do not believe we have any announcements, reports, or presentations this evening. However, we do have an agenda modification. Teresa, would you explain our agenda modification?
Yes, Deputy Mayor. Resolution number 5637 was removed from the agenda.
Thank you. Okay, Council, we'll move into our agenda items for council discussion this evening. And the first item on the agenda is ordinance number 6839 with Director Galb.
Good evening, and I'm actually going to have a right-of-way specialist, Amber Olds, give you the staff presentation to go over the right-of-way vacation that's being proposed and is under consideration next week by council. Amber?
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Mayor, and council members. I'm Amber Olds, right-of-way specialist with the Public Works Department. Give me just a second while I share my screen with everyone. And hopefully everybody can see the map that I've put on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm here to discuss draft ordinance number 6839 for right-of-way vacation VAC 21-0002 for proposed vacation of a portion of West Main Street east of Lund Road Southwest. The right-of-way proposed for vacation is shown in red on the map on the screen and also on page 17 of 108 of your agenda packet. A portion of the proposed right-of-way vacation area originally became right-of-way in 1888 and was known as Bede Road number 222. The majority of this right-of-way was acquired by the state for construction of SR 167 through warranty deed in 1969 and was subsequently conveyed to the city of Auburn from to the state through a governor's deed in 1974. The applicant, Mr. Pazzi, who's the adjacent property owner, has applied for the right-of-way vacation, and he's proposing to incorporate the area into the adjacent parcel to the south. The applicant would like to add additional parking for the trucking company located on the parcel. Proposed vacation area would be used for city storm drainage system and also to meet street landscaping and setback requirements for the additional parking area. City staff, city staff from Public Works, along with other city departments, jurisdictions, and utility purveyors who have interest in the area and in the right-of-way, have reviewed it and determined that the right-of-way is not necessary to meet the needs of the city and could be vacated. Staff supports vacation of the right-of-way with the following conditions. Easements need to be reserved for Puget Sound Energy, electric and gas facilities, CenturyLink telecommunications facilities, and Comcast cable facilities. Easements would also be reserved for city water, sewer, and stormwater facilities. The applicant would also be required to move the existing fence that is currently at the back of sidewalk on West Main Street to the current property line as it exists prior to the proposed vacation area to provide access to the city storm structures. They'd also be required to obtain permits, including grading permits, remove gravel and construct proper site improvements such as parking, lighting, landscaping, and storm drainage to the storm inlet structures per the city's engineering, design, and construction standards. In addition, they'd also be required to obtain permits and replace the existing domed storm inlet structures with concrete aprons and standard grates to all the storm inlet structures in the vacation area. Staff also recommends that compensation for the full appraised value of the right-of-way in the amount of $45,000 be required, as it has been right-of-way for more than 25 years, and a portion of it was initially acquired by the state for construction of 167, and the city has incurred costs for maintenance of the facilities in the vacation area. Staff recommends that the conditions of the vacation be completed within 1 year of approval. And public benefit would include a decrease of maintenance right away and an increase potentially in property taxes, as it would be, the vacated area would be subject to property taxes. A public hearing is currently scheduled for December 20th at the next city council meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Amber Council? Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Let's see, is that Amber? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, okay, it's so hard to find. I think terrible at that game concentration. So who owns the property?
The property is owned by Ralph Pawsey, and he currently has a business on the parcel for night transportation, I believe, is the business that's on the property.
Okay, so he owns it, but there's just a right of way on top of it.
Yeah, the area for vacation is city right of way. Mr. Pawsey owns the adjacent parcel to the south.
Okay, so he does not own that right of way.
He does not own the right of way. It is city right of way.
Oh, so the city owns it.
Yes.
Okay, and are we selling it to him or giving it to him?
It would be the vacation process he's applied for. So it would be up to council to decide if we want to vacate it. And staff is recommending that we charge him $45,000 for it, which is the appraised value. Council can agree to charge that or a portion of that or not charge him anything.
Oh, okay, thank you. That's really helpful. I wasn't sure about that. Okay.
Okay. Councilor J. Raj, you still have a question? No? Okay, thank you. Yeah, kind of just pointing out on your packet on page 15, it describes the MAI appraisal and the $45,000, which is a right away using the across the fence methodology at $4.25 per square foot. And quite interesting, Amber, that this was a right away created back in 1888.
A portion of it was, yes.
Yes. Any other questions for Amber Council? Okay, Amber, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now move into our into our neighborhood traffic calming program overview. I skipped the line here. Director Galb again.
Yes, thank you. And so for tonight, I have Cecile Malik, who is our senior transportation planner, who is going to speak to you about the update to our neighborhood traffic calming program that we'd like to implement for 2022. Cecile.
Good evening. I'm going to attempt to share the screen. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. The view has changed in Zoom and it looks all different. So All right, so good evening, Deputy Mayor, Mayor, Council members. For the record, my name is Cecile Malik, and I'm the Senior Transportation Planner for Auburn. And I'm here this evening to talk to you about a proposed update to our neighborhood traffic calming program. And I would like to start this presentation by reading you a definition of traffic calming from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. Traffic calming reduces automobile speeds or volumes as a means of improving the quality of life in residential areas, increasing walking safety, and making bicycling more comfortable. So traffic calming is quite important, and we have different approaches to address traffic calming. One is education, which could be social media posts, articles, mailings, temporary signs, and the such to educate people and bring more awareness on the importance of traffic safety. We have enforcement, which is typically done by our police department. We have engineering, which is physical improvements on the streets, for example, speed cushions or traffic calming circles. And then there is an evaluation component, which is the data collection to evaluate the speeds and volumes on streets. So a little bit of history on the traffic calming in Auburn. So the neighborhood traffic calming program was adopted by council in 2005 and updated in 2006. In recent years, we've received in the traffic engineering department an average of 50 to 60 speeding complaints each year, while our Auburn Police Department has received an average of 200 to 250 speeding complaints each year. With the COVID impact, we had to put the traffic calming program on hold in March. But while it was on hold, we continued our coordination with our police department for targeted enforcement. So we've continued our coordination and communication. We've worked on updating our program, and we are ready to implement it in 2022. So what are the objectives of this updated program? So some of the objectives include reducing vehicle speeds and discouraging cut-through traffic in residential areas, improving safety for all users. There is the educational component. We want to educate residents through traffic safety awareness and outreach. We want to better meet Auburn's equity goals, and we really want to encourage resident participation in the process. So historically, we have addressed traffic calming with a location-specific spot treatment approach, which is more reactive, which means we'll receive complaints, we will study the street of the specific location where the complaint was placed. We'll study it, and if we did find a speeding issue, then we would move forward with implementation of a traffic calming treatment. Most generally, it was speed cautions or radar feedback signs, depending on the street. Now, this approach worked in addressing that specific area. But one of the downsides is when we're done with a street, we will get calls from the adjacent street saying, hey, you put speed bumps or speed cushions on my neighbor's street, and now all the traffic is coming down my street and there is speeding and we have a problem with that. And then we'll have to go through the process all over again on the next street. And so it kind of moves the issue over. The other issue with that approach, or something we're trying to address with the new approach, is that not everybody complains. So if we only respond to areas where we receive complaint, we are missing areas where maybe people don't know that they can complain, or don't know that they can complain, or how to complain, or how to say something, or maybe there are areas where there is a language barrier, and or maybe a fear to reach out to the government to say something for whatever reason. And we want to make sure that we look at those areas as well, because everyone deserves to be in a safe neighborhood. And so what this update is proposing is to have more of an emphasis on an area-wide treatment, which is more proactive in the sense that we'll look at the areas where we receive complaint, but not only the specific location, we want to look at the whole neighborhood. So if we go respond to a complaint, then we want to look at the adjacent streets. We want to look at the street network, and we want to go talk to people, so collect data and talk to people and ask them, how are they experiencing the traffic in their neighborhood? And we want them to be involved in giving us feedback on traffic calming treatment that they will support if any are needed. And so this is much more proactive. This is more involved in community outreach, which addresses equity better. And ultimately, it is a more successful approach because we're not going to be moving the traffic around. We're just going to address the whole area and push traffic on the streets that are designed to take most of the traffic, and make sure that the local streets, local residential streets, are used mainly for local access. So that was a lot in one slide. So how are we going to select the areas? That's the big question. So it's going to be a multi-step process. So first, we haven't gotten to the budget yet, but the larger portion of the budget for 2022 and hopefully for 2023 and 2024 will come from the ARPA funds. And these funds can only be used in the qualified census tracts as defined by HUD. So we'll be looking in these tracts, and in these tracts, we'll be looking at neighborhoods that have a street layout that can potentially encourage cut-through traffic and where there may be some speeding concerns. So we'll be also reviewing where we've received complaints. And then, of course, we'll have to size the area that we select to an area that is manageable based on the annual budget and the staff availability to work on this. So this is a little bit of an overview for those who are visual or like this type of visual that kind of walk through the process that we're envisioning for this program implementation. So the area selection, which we just talked about, reviewing the demographic data, defining the area boundaries, then we'll go out and study the whole area and look at the street information, look at the destinations that may generate traffic, such as schools, convenience stores, city parks, and so on. Look at the data, what are the speeds and volumes that we see on those streets. And then there will be an outreach process where we will share the data with the community, and we will collect information from the residents. So asking those questions, how are you experiencing the traffic on your street? And we want to hear what they are seeing as issues so that it is not just the data, but also the residents have a say. They know their streets, so they can share that with us. And then we will be working in collaboration with the residents, in a sense, in making sure that as we go through the process of selecting any traffic calming treatment, that we choose treatments that the neighborhood will support. we don't want to impose any changes that the neighborhood will not support. And so then we'll go through the design and construction phase. So developing that final project plans, going through the bid, hiring a contractor, getting the improvements constructed. And then once everything is done, we'll want to survey the community where the improvements were made to make sure that that everything worked out the way it was supposed to. So when we're talking about traffic calming treatment, what are we talking about? So I have a couple of slides with some examples. So this is not comprehensive, but it's just to give you an idea. So some traffic calming treatments could include a median island, which narrows the street, or it could be a raised intersection, which gets people to slow down before they reach the intersection. It could be a traffic calming circle or some speed cautions. So there's a lot of different things that we can do to slow people down. So now you might be wondering, well, what happens on other streets that are not within the qualified census tracts, that are not within connected streets? We're not going to ignore them. So sometimes we'll get complaints in small streets, such as the one that you can see in the picture on the slide, that have a small cul-de-sac where the majority of the traffic is the residents and their guests. So for this type of street, we would want to address traffic calming differently. And we'd really want to work on neighborhood education about traffic safety, and potentially the placement of temporary educational items, such as temporary signs or the police speed trailer. And occasionally, when needed, the police will go talk with somebody if they know of somebody who is driving recklessly through a neighborhood. So these are different approaches. It doesn't mean that we'll do all the approach in every neighborhood, but these are some tools that we have available for this type of situations. So budget. So in the most recent years before 2020, we had an annual budget of $50,000 for the traffic calming program, which was REIT funds. In 2020, that budget was reduced to $10,000 as the program was put on hold. And that continued through 2021. So we had about $10,000 each year. For 2022, the approved budget for the neighborhood traffic calming program is going back to $50,000 from the REIT funds, and $200,000 are allocated from the ARPA funds. And we will be proposing to have the same budget in 2023 and 2024. And then 2025 and beyond will be decided later. So what are the next steps? So next Monday, you will be asked to take action on the proposed resolution 5635 to adopt the updated neighborhood traffic calming program, which could be then implemented in January 2022. And then in April 2023, you will be presented the proposed 2023-2024 budget for the program. And the full program description with all the details is located on page 19 of your packet. And I am ready for questions.
Thank you, Cecile. Thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
I have a few questions to start with. So we are looking at this not only based upon complaints that you mentioned, we're looking at this as an equity issue as well. And then receiving input from residents in the area. On page 21 of our packet, it talks about the potential traffic calming measures that residents could pursue and install at their own cost. and there needs to be affidavits from at least 51% of the neighborhood property owners that the improvements were desired, and acknowledging that the city may remove and not reconstruct at any time, and perhaps reimburse or compensate the residents. Have we had a situation on the traffic calming where residents in the neighborhoods, I guess I'll use the word approve what we're doing? I know we're looking at this as an equity issue, but in times past, have we had the residents concur, or I guess I'll use the word vote, in the process before the traffic calming is put in place?
Okay, so it's two different things that we're talking about. So let me clarify a little bit. So the process that you're looking at on page 21, right?
Yes.
With the neighborhood financing and building those improvements. So this is new. This is a new option that we're proposing because we've had several neighborhoods that are closed neighborhoods, kind of like cul-de-sac, where there was not a significant, or not even, there wasn't a significant traffic speed issue in the neighborhood that justified any type of improvement. However, the neighborhoods were very interested in building speed cushions, but we don't allow that right now. And so they couldn't get the speed cushions that they wanted, and they said, we will pay for it, we will build them, we really want them. And so we wanted to give that option at the condition that they could show us that there was sufficient support from the rest of the neighborhood. And the thing is that if we allow them to build speed cushions on their street every very many years, when the street deteriorates enough, we will go back and reconstruct the street. But because it is not something that was, the speed cushions were not justified, we cannot justify spending taxpayer money to rebuild those speed cushions. So if we redo the street, then we will ask them again, would you like to rebuild these at this time? Because they will be removed during the reconstruction. And if we give property owners or neighborhoods that option, we want to be very upfront about it. So we want them to know that this may happen and that these are the conditions for them to build the speed cushions. We're not going to tell them when we repave the street, you have to pay for them again. We will tell them, would you like to build them again? Now, the other question you asked, did we reach out to residents before we installed traffic calming treatment? Yes. So there's always, especially when we're looking at speed cushions, they do impact the residents on the street you install them, because people have to slow down and then they go over the bump and then they reaccelerate. So there is a little bit of an impact. So it does slow people down, but there is a bit of an impact. And so we, in the past, have sent surveys to the residents on the street where we propose speed cushions. And based on the responses, if we had a high enough number of responses, and in this number of responses, a high enough percentage of support, then we will go build them. And if not, we did not install them, because we did not want to give that negative impact on residents who did not want it.
Great, thank you very much. That does very much so, thank you. Also, the vertical measurements of the speed cushions shows all of our different measurements, and it talks about the potential speed limit, or the travel speed of 25 to 30 miles per hour over the speed cushions. I think this question has been asked way many times in the past, but the vertical height, the height of the speed cushion, do we have that identified anywhere? I imagine we do. And then also, is a 25 to 30 mile an hour speed limit or speed travel over that speed cushion, it seems to be a little bit fast.
So typically you're most comfortable driving slower, but you can drive at that speed without damaging your car. We usually
Okay.
have an advisory speed of 15 miles per hour as you approach a speed cushion. But if people are driving at the speed limit, which is 25, it's usually the most comfortable way to get over those speed cushions. And the question about the height, I have that somewhere. It's in our design guidelines, and I think it's maybe 3 inches, I want to say, but I am not 100% sure. I'd have to look it up.
Okay, that's fine. Oh, if you
But
were
they're
just
not
kind of,
very
yeah.
not very high, but just there is
Right.
a ramp. So in the design,
Yes,
there is a ramp up to the platform and then back down. And
Right.
if you're driving over it, as you should with both wheels, if you stay in your lane, then your 2 wheels go over. And if you respect the speed limit, you will be going over there safely.
right. No, that answers it pretty well, because we said approximately 3 inches or maybe a little bit higher. That's fine. That just, I was visioning in my mind, it was much taller than that. So no,
I mean, it could be
answers
3 or 4, but
Yeah,
I mean, it's not very, it's not very, very tall.
that's excellent. That answers the question. Thank you very much. Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Cecile, I'm curious about the cost of the traffic measures. So can you tell me how expensive a speed cushion is? And then you had mentioned when it's put in privately, how much does it cost to remove it?
I don't have the answer about the removing cost. I think that's just going to be part of removing the pavement, and I don't think that it would add a significant amount to the removal.
Okay, so we haven't removed any really, probably.
I don't know. We might have.
So I can answer that. We have done some projects where we do have existing speed humps or speed cushions, and we have replaced them currently because all of the speed cushions that have gone in through this traffic calming process, and therefore we're in warranted locations. So the ones where we're talking about having private property owners pay for, they're not technically warranted by the speeding and the traffic movements that we're actually seeing in the neighborhood. So we don't necessarily have a specific cost because, as Cecile said, it's very much part of the removal of the pavement for the roadway. But I wouldn't see it adding a very significant amount, probably less than 500 to a city project cost in the middle of another capital project where we have a lot of other work happening. If we were to do it on its own, it would be significantly higher than that.
Okay, how much does it cost to put one in then?
Okay, so that I have the answer for. So if you wanted to install one set of 3, because they come in sets, so to go across the street, typically we'll put 3, unless the street is really wide, we might need 4. But a set of 3 speed cushions are about $5,000.
5,000?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the budget you're talking about is 50, is that right?
Well, we have $50,000 that will be unrestricted in locations and $200,000 that will be restricted to the qualified census tracts as defined by HUD.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
and the speed cushions are not the only type of traffic calming treatment we're looking at. So some improvements are significantly more expensive. So for example, if you're looking at the traffic calming circle that was in the picture on the slide, that one cost around $50,000. So like traffic calming circle could cost anywhere between $35,000 and $50,000.
How much do the traffic speed feedback things cost?
The radar feedback signs, I don't have updated numbers. I think they were around $2,000.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think I'm just curious about sort of how much things sort of cost and what we're
Right.
spending. That's sort of what I'm getting at. Thanks.
Yeah. And the cost of the radar feedback signs, I'm not 100% sure, and especially a lot of the cost of material has gone up over the pandemic. So I'd have to get a quote from a vendor, see what is the actual cost today. But the radar feedback signs, they're not necessarily something that we're looking to invest as much as other types of treatment. The radar feedback signs, we're looking at them more as a temporary treatment that we could rotate because they are effective for a while, but after a while, people stop paying attention to the sign flashing the speed back at them. So if we move them around, then they become new again and become more effective. They don't force people, they don't really force people to slow down. So people see the speed and some people may care and some people may not care.
I got you. Okay. Yeah, I'd love to know the cost. Thank you. If you could get that to me.
Councilmember Troutman.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor DeCoursey. Cecile, I thank you for a great report, and I am really excited about the new approach. My question is on the outreach. You're sharing data and then the input, collecting input. Who are we reaching? Are we reaching just certain areas that are complaining, or are we reaching the whole city? And how do you collect the input?
Okay, so we will be selecting every year an area to study and to put our focus on, which will be based on the qualified census tracts, the street geometry, and the complaints we've received. But then we're going to reach out to the whole neighborhood within that area. And we will work really hard on making sure that we reach out to people in their language as much as possible. So really do our research to find out how to best reach people. Is it through mail? Do we need to go to the schools? Do we need to go to their local church? Do we need to just knock on their doors? Hopefully not, because that will take a lot of time. But we really want to let people know that we want them included, we want them to participate, we want to hear from them. And so we want to reach out to them in the way that best works for them, but within the area that we're studying that year, because we can only do so much in 1 year.
Right. I know that up here where I live, you guys have done such a great job on putting those speed bumps. And also in one area where I know that my neighbor kept complaining about, and it took a couple of years, but you put a roundabout in that small area and it saved, it really helped the whole neighborhood because there was a lot of traffic going through from the casino. They were wrecking into their yard. So the roundabout that you put is a small one, but it really served its purpose. So they did tell me to thank you. I've been forgetting to say thank you. It's been already 2 years. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Any other questions for Cecile, Council? I don't see any. Cecile, thank you very much once again. Good seeing you again, and thank you for the report.
Thank you so much. And I will make sure that council members turn that I share the cost for the radar feedback signs.
Great, thank you. All right, that moves us into our finance, technology, and economic development discussion items, our special focus area. And for that portion of the meeting, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Baggett.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, this portion of the study session for the council is related to finance, technology, and economic development, as Deputy Mayor explained. We have 2 items tonight to discuss and review. They are both finance related. And with that, I believe I will turn the program over to our Director of Finance, and that's Jamie Thomas.
Thank you, Councilmember Baggett. I'm Director Thomas, and I'm going to start with our ordinance number 6845, which is a proposed code amendment to our business and occupation tax. And I will get us started with that. presentation. Do you see the full slide or do you see my edit screen? Okay.
To your edit screen.
Yeah.
All right. No. Well, there's another way to look at it.
There we go.
Okay. All right. I just want to show you everything. I want you to have options. So I apologize. So before I get into the code amendments that we're proposing with Ordinance 6845, I wanted to go ahead and give council really a status overview with BNO Tax in general. I think really the last time that we came back with an update was back in May when council had adopted the business and occupation tax. And in that code, the BNO tax becomes effective January 1st of 2022. So just in a couple of weeks. There's going to be two types of businesses that we have. We're going to assign for those businesses that actually have BNO tax that are subject to BNO tax. We'll have annual filers and we'll have quarterly filers. Most businesses at the beginning of our ramping up to the BNO tax will be annual filers. They'll be assigned an annual filing status and their first tax returns will be due in the first quarter of 2023. So actually more than a year from now. We will be seeking out a combination of volunteer businesses as well as some businesses that we're going to select to really be our beta users, our first users of our customer online filing system to be quarterly filers. And those quarterly filers will then have their first quarterly or their quarter one BNO tax due between April 1st and April 30th of 2022. We're working on our outreach program right now to those businesses that are going to be impacted the soonest with those quarter one reporting requirements. One of the reasons why we are trying to limit the number of businesses that we have reporting quarterly, particularly this first year, is that there's a pretty complex system between our front end user portal and our back end database. And we want to make sure that we have the most customer service friendly experience when all of our businesses begin reporting at once. And so we would like to use a smaller group of businesses to try out the system first. They get more personalized one-on-one customer service if there are any issues along the way. Hopefully there are none, but if there are, they would have a more responsive service on the city's end. Our front-end user portal their name is File Local. When they're really the most cost-effective and customer service user-friendly option for cities to use. Most cities in Washington state that have BNO tax does use File Local. They are the front end customer service space for filing and reporting business and occupation tax. And we will be coming to council in the next couple of weeks, actually month, to enter into an interlocal agreement, which allows us to have a voting right at the File Local table. So when there are amendments that are needed to the customer portal, we take priority. We're part of a full group that decides what are the most important fixes for the system. So that's kind of the technical end of things that are happening right now with BNO tax. For me, it's the most complex, but it's perhaps the most important part of the business and occupation tax implementation. For me, the most exciting part is our tax and licensing coordinator that we have hired. We went through a pretty rigorous recruiting process and interview process, and we found a really amazing candidate. And her first day with the city is actually on Thursday. So December 16th will be her first day, and she will be jumping in and really just she'll be everything business and occupation tax and helping coordinate also with Director Tate's group and the business licensing side of things. So that is where we've been and where we're moving. What I am proposing to council tonight for consideration for adoption at the next council meeting is a code amendment. And that we're really amending 2 sections to the code, or we're proposing amendments to 2 sections of the code. The first is language on the exemption section for nonprofit healthcare organizations. The way it is currently worded is a little bit ambiguous as far as what is the exemption threshold, but we also want to change the exemption threshold to make it a higher threshold. So right now the language reads that essentially any nonprofit healthcare organization with a gross income less than $30 million annually would be exempt. We want to change that language to say that any nonprofit healthcare organization with net operating income less than $10 million will be exempt. Now it's a little confusing because we're changing the threshold. Seems like it's a lower threshold from 30 million to 10 million, but it's kind of in the definition of what we're exempting. So gross income, again, wasn't very clear. We hadn't used the word gross income anywhere else in our BNO code, but one would imply that it means gross revenue, since that is the language that we used throughout our BNO code and other places. Gross revenue is a much higher threshold to actually meet, where net operating income would deduct out operating expenses before applying the tax. So even though we're looking at $10 million, we're proposing $10 million instead of $30 million, we're looking at net operating income, which we further clarify in the section to define net operating income to aggregate all of the gross revenues of the organization from operating activities and services. And we're deducting the total expenses related to operating activities. We're going to deduct uncollectible debts and uncompensated services, and that would get you to your net operating income. Capital expenditures, debt service, and other non-cash transactions don't get to count as a reduction on that gross revenue to determine the threshold. But there's a couple of reasons, in addition to clarity, that we felt that this was really important for the City Council to consider, is really the importance of the nonprofit healthcare organization, our major one in the city, and the types of services that they provide to its residents. And a gross revenue measurement is not really reflective of the nature and how a nonprofit healthcare organization actually works. Non-care or nonprofit healthcare organizations have a very high level of uncompensated care. So those are services and care that they have to provide, and we want them to provide to our residents. But the hospital, for instance, does not receive any compensation in a lot of cases for a lot of the care they provide. And so we want to be able to take those types of services and care that are not necessarily paid to the hospital or reimbursed to the hospital. We want to be able to have them deduct those types of services from their threshold calculation. We don't want to prohibit their ability and desire to reinvest into the city for enhanced and better care for the city of Auburn. The second piece is actually a really easy amendment. It's just a clarification piece. It is in the deduction section, also for nonprofit healthcare organizations. It's not changing any language other than for consistency purposes, and adding the word gross revenue rather than just revenue, which is currently worded. What this means is and really the purpose of this deduction is if you are a nonprofit healthcare organization that does not meet that exemption threshold that we just talked about, and you are subject to BNO tax, that you will be able to deduct the first $30 million in gross revenue in calculating your taxable revenue base. Quite complex, I understand. But with that, I would like to answer any questions that the council might have about our proposal.
Council, do you have any opinions or questions? Councilmember Stearns.
Opinions, uh-oh. Don't get me started. Thanks, Jamie. I was just wondering, I remember when we were, drafting this, we looked at other cities. Does this issue come up in other cities? Do they have, okay.
It does. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It's really the biggest issue for the cities that have big hospitals. So you have Seattle, you have Bellevue, Tacoma, Olympia, I think Spokane, also Bellingham. So every city has something written a little bit differently. Renton also has a hospital as well. We had taken some language from that really mostly our original language most closely mirrored Tacoma's language. And I'm not sure the types of services, the citizens, or the size of our hospital really is comparable so much to Tacoma and their nonprofit healthcare organizations, which is why ours required a little bit closer, a closer look and tweaking to really make it more relevant to our nonprofit healthcare organizations.
Okay, so is it then the goal to exempt multi-care, Auburn, or?
No, I wouldn't say that's our goal. It's not to.
Is that the effect, I guess?
I'm going to be honest. I don't know if this exempts them entirely from the tax. If it does now, it may not in the future. It's to create more clarification around at what point are they exempt that threshold. Really, there was a lot of question like, what does this threshold even mean when it comes to the exemption? So that's where we defined it more closely. And then if they are exempt, I think that just, at least now, it would help with the idea of them perhaps investing back into the city and not being so cost prohibitive.
I mean, I think in terms of me, supporting this, I'd like to know. I mean, I think I'd like to know what the effect is.
So where that gets a little bit tricky is when it comes to a specific business's revenues and operations that is proprietary. And so, I mean, we can talk to Multicare and see if they would like to share that information, but we have to be very careful about sharing proprietary information when it comes to a business operations and their financials.
Okay, well, maybe we don't need to talk Multicare. We can just talk like, why not 20 million?
And I can answer that. I think I was trying to set a threshold that was reasonable. So I don't want to just make a blanket exemption for everybody. So that was why we had landed on the $10 million.
Okay, I think that's helpful. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Brown.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The question I have, it's I guess similar to Councilmember Stearns. So if I understand correctly, I mean, part of this this ordinance is policy by this city council to induce certain behaviors through the tax code, which is entirely legitimate, I believe. But it's to help induce uncompensated care for the residents of our city and surrounding areas. Is this correct?
That is a significant component of it, correct?
Okay, good. Well, I just appreciate that until we have a time when, everybody can walk in to see a doctor. We have to rely on what some people have called charity care, but uncompensated care. And to the extent that we can get nonprofits to do that, I find that pretty good public policy. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Okay. Well, moving along here, we're going to now address the third quarter 2021 financial report update. Jamie.
Thank you. And let's see if I've learned anything from my first slideshow. I've done it enough. You'd think I have it down by now, but I don't know. I think I know.
Not quite.
Mhm.
Not yet.
Let's try one more thing.
There we go.
Got the full screen. All right. So
When you get it all down pat, you can train me.
I need a trainer, clearly. There are a lot more people slicker at this than I am, which is why I said that the software piece of the BNO Tax is the most complex in my mind.
You're not alone.
Thank you. So we're now talking, we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about our third quarter financial report for 2021. This is for all of our general fund activity, plus some for January through September 2021. And this is a chart or a graph that you're familiar with mostly. It's a summary of all of our general fund's most significant revenue sources and what we've collected year to date compared to what we collected year to date in 2020 and what we had originally projected to collect year to date through our budget process. I'm going to really call out the most significant revenue sources and how they vary from either our budgeted amounts or 2020 actuals. Our sales tax is the first one that really stands out. This source is really has got the largest variance between what we had originally budgeted as well as 2020. I think that it's a pretty common trend that most cities in our area are experiencing just a very high sales tax collection. There's a lot of movement in the economy and a lot of transactions, and because of that, our sales tax revenues have been much higher than we had originally anticipated, which, if you recall, when we did our 2022 biennial budget realignment and we looked at our significant revenue sources, we increased our projection, our budget for sales tax in 2022 up by $2.5 million because of the trends and what we were seeing in 2021. We'll look more at the details in a couple more slides on sales tax. A couple of other revenue sources that are very closely related, they're separate lines, but they're closely related, that is building permits and other licenses and permits. It's just different revenue sources tied to mostly the same underlying permitting and licensing activity in our community and economic development department. Same thing with charges for services. Charges for services are, a lot of it's being driven by what's happening in community and economic development, as well as the activity in our Parks and Recs department as well. And we'll look at that in more detail. And then a significant decrease from our prior year is that transfers in number. It's the same $1.9 million less than prior years, and that was due to a large transfer that we had budgeted in 2020 from our cumulative reserve fund as a cash infusion into our general fund. We have not budgeted for that in 2021, and due to the revenue activity that we're seeing in 2021, we will not need to do any sort of transfer like that this year. Our total expenditures are favorable by $6.5 million, which means that through all our general fund departments, we are currently underspending our $65 million budget. We've underspent by $6 million. Our largest departments contributing to this underspend is our police department, as well as our Parks and Rec department. These are tied really to staffing, all really citywide. It has to do with staffing. We've had the first quarter of the year, we had the hiring freezes in 2020. We didn't get really fully staffed until, we didn't start filling those positions until the first quarter of 2021. So we had some salary savings there. And then we've just had a very high amount of attrition, really citywide in different positions, not anything that's reflective of the city so much, just really reflective of a lot of things that we're seeing in other cities and really other industries and employees making either career change decisions or even moving out of state. I think that there's a lot of employees making career changes for many different reasons, and we're seeing that here in the city as well, which all of that to say is contributing to really that favorable variance in the budget savings so far through September. So to look in a little bit more detail at that retail sales tax, we are overperforming 2020 by $2.2 million year to date. You can see that solid black line is just way off the chart, which is great to see. And we're so far $3.5 million over budget year to date. The sectors that are really overperforming and contributing to this, well, they're all contributing with the exception of manufacturing. But the largest sectors that are contributing to this large increase is transportation and warehousing. It's up 127%. The overall dollar amount isn't as big, but percentage-wise, it's pretty large. And that is those Uber Eats, DoorDashes, and other courier services that have really had a pretty lucrative entrance into the market beginning with COVID in 2020. The automotive sector, you can see, is doing very well over 2020. And the same thing with retail trade. We're seeing the same industries. It's all retail industries across the board: home improvement, home furnishings, all of those sub-sectors of the retail trade are doing really well, as well as services. What's really driving the services sector is eating establishments and restaurants and fast food restaurants. Utility tax is also a pretty significant revenue source for the general fund. We haven't seen a very large variance compared to our budget or to prior year, so it didn't pop up on that first chart that we looked at, but because it is a significant revenue source, I did want to talk about it like I usually do. Just a reminder that we have two types of utilities that pay into this utility tax revenue. We have external utilities, which is electric, cable, cell phone, telephone tax, and that tax rate is 6%. 6% of that revenue is remitted to the city, and we record it in utility tax. The second type of utilities that pay into the utility tax are our internal utilities, so our water, sewer, storm, and solid waste utilities. And because they are our own city utilities, we charge 9% on those utilities. 9% comes into the general fund, 1% goes into the arterial street fund. So there's a total of a 10% internal utilities utility tax. We are currently under budget by $112,000 or 1% compared to what we had budgeted. But we are almost $465,000 over 2020. This number is we have a couple of different reasons why there's such a large variance over 2020. One, we have the increase in utility tax that we went from a 6% utility tax to a 9% utility tax for our internal utilities, which we expected to generate about $1.4 million more. However, that's offset by an infusion of our utility taxes in 2020. We had brought in $1.9 million into the general fund from the arterial streets fund. So that's why we're not seeing a $1.3 million increase over the prior year, even though we increased our utility tax rate by so much. It's being offset by an infusion that we had brought in 2020. So other than that, it's really on track with what we'd expected. It is $112,000 under budget, and I suspect that has a lot to do with the fewer usage of utilities, both external and internal utilities, from large businesses that were maybe slow to get back into business and up running from COVID. So I think this was a little bit of a residual but we'll definitely be watching those tax numbers to make sure that we don't need to be adjusting our 2022 revenue projections for utility tax. So now we're going to just talk all the green numbers and all the really good news that economic development is helping us with, and that is all of the building permit activity that we've been seeing. We remain pretty strong through 2020. We've continued to remain strong through 2021. We're currently $585,000 over budget in our building permit revenue, and we're $444,000 over our prior year. And considering 2020 was a pretty strong year, really compared to 2019, I believe that this is a good thing for now. We've issued 397 permits, and that should say Q3. I apologize. We've issued 397 permits through Q3 versus 371 through the same time period last year. Our average construction value is actually lower this year than it was last year, which makes sense because we had a couple of very large school construction projects that were taking place last year, and that really brought up our average value of permit value because the value of those projects were so large. But we have a higher volume, which is why we're seeing more revenue. So that takes me to our intergovernmental revenue. There's several different sub-sources that flow through this intergovernmental revenue. This could be federal, state, and our local grants. We also have our Muckleshoot Indian Tribe Compact revenue that we record in this line item, and our state shared revenue. And our state shared revenue is our streamlined sales tax, which was just reinstated in June of this year, our motor vehicle excise tax, our marijuana and liquor excise taxes, and our criminal justice sales tax. And that's all a portion of the state sales tax that the state collects, and then they remit to us. That's our portion. We are overperforming our budget by $725,000 in the intergovernmental revenue. There's really two primary things contributing to this. We had a one-time revenue of $332,000 from Senate Bill 5092. And that was the Senate bill that gave money back to cities for unfunded mandates. So recognizing that there's all these unfunded mandates that create costs for the cities, but we don't have a revenue source to provide those services. That's where the $332,000 came into the city. And if you may recall from our budget amendment 3 and 4, we are using that portion of that, or all of that, over the next 2 years towards our body cameras, our police body cameras initiative. And then another reason why our intergovernmental revenue is overperforming is the streamlined sales tax mitigation. We had anticipated to collect $1 million in 2021. We weren't sure with our increased sales tax revenues that we've been receiving, how that was going to impact our streamlined sales tax mitigation. So we had budgeted for $1 million. And so far we are overperforming. We have collected a little over $1.2 million this year in streamlined sales tax mitigation. And we'll probably end the year at about $1.5 million if we continue on the same trend. We're overperforming last year, and that again is a result of the streamlined sales tax mitigation. We did not receive any of that revenue in 2020, and we're receiving it this year. So that is the major reason for our overperformance, which is being offset by a pretty significant decline in the motor vehicle excise tax revenues that we've been collecting. Charges for services. There's several different departments that roll into this charges for services line. We've got general government revenues, or general government services, public safety services, development services, and our culture and recreation division. General government is really, there isn't actually a service that we're providing to external agencies, mostly, or external customers. This has to do with the internal services that we provide all of the other activities throughout the city. So that is our finance, HR, and legal costs. All that cost is 100% borne in the general fund, but recognizing that all of the funds throughout the city take advantage of finance, HR, and legal services. And so that is how we charge out and get the general fund reimbursed for the cost of those services. But like I had mentioned before, we have unspent expenditures because of unfilled staffing positions, and therefore the revenue is a little bit lower than we had budgeted by 119,000. Our public safety revenue is over budget by 194,000, and this has to do with reimbursement for law enforcement services for private businesses and reimbursement for officers at the Criminal Justice Training Center and our school resource officers for the Auburn School District. Our development services are $573,000 above budget. These are plan check fees, facility extension fees, and zoning and subdivision fees. Again, related to our building permit revenues, different revenues, different fees, but related to mostly the same underlying activity, which is why we're performing above budget and development services. And then culture and recreation is up $170,000 over our budget. And 75% of the revenue in culture and recreation right now is green fees. The other portion of the revenue that we collect is from recreational classes, the Auburn Avenue Theater, and other programs at the community center. Other notable highlights, these are our one-time revenues used for really reserved for one-time projects or capital projects, which actually Cecile in the previous presentation was talking about some of the traffic calming programs and the budget associated with that over the next couple of years. And a large portion of that does come from real estate excise tax. So, or not a portion of it comes from real estate excise tax. And so that's why I wanted to go over our one-time revenue sources, because it really kind of helps set the parameters for what we have available for our capital projects and us being able to reinvest into our infrastructure in the city. So year to date, we have collected $4.3 million in REIT. I think everybody knows that the real estate market has been pretty strong over the last year and a half. September of this year actually was our highest month for revenues in the last 2 years. So we had a very large sale, which contributed to that. But so far, there doesn't seem to be really any fluctuation in the real estate market, at least as far as real estate excise tax is concerned. We're performing $1.5 million over the prior year, and we have collected $2.8 million over our year-to-date budget for REITs. Transportation impact fees and park impact fees are also related to the permitting process and the building permit process. We have collected $2.4 million in transportation impact fees year to date, and we have collected $301,000 in park impact fees year to date. So because water, sewer, and storm are just as important, if not more important, but they're not a part of the general fund, and they are proprietary funds. I did want to talk about them a little bit because they are so important and they do still exist. The one thing that I'm much more hopeful over is our graph there. This is just looking at water revenues and water sold, but we're finally starting to track our water revenues and our water sales are starting to have an upward trend and move away from our 2020. We did have a reduction in our water revenues and our water sales during the quarantine lockdown portion of COVID, and we are starting to recover from that now. And of course, it's summer months too, and summer months always have a higher consumption than non-summer months. But this also drives our utility tax revenue that we were talking about a few slides ago. So that's why I like to watch our actual water sales graphs a little bit more closely. From an operating standpoint, in the water, sewer, storm utilities combined, we ended the third quarter with $7 million in net operating income. It's a little bit less than our net operating income from 2020. but it just has to do with higher operating costs, capital projects that we've been paying for, and then those higher operating costs mostly related to personnel and utility taxes. And that brings me to my last slide. Are there any questions?
Questions from the council? Councilmember Stearns.
Oh, thank you, Councilmember Baggett. Hey, Jamie, I mean, just a question about that last slide you shared, and I was just wondering if you could explain something to me I don't understand, which is, yeah, wherever that slide is.
My screen share got stopped.
Okay, let me see if I can find it in the packet here.
I
But there was a difference between, I found it, water revenues and water sold. And so the blue bottom line, that was the water sold. And so you can definitely tell that it increases like in the summertime.
mhm.
But then the water revenue also increases. But it seems to increase by, maybe it's just the way it's charted, but it looks like it really increases a lot more. And I'm wondering why the revenues increase so much more than the water sold.
It really is linear, because the numbers are smaller on the water sold side, that little marker kind of blurs the lines between the 2020 and the 2021 values. Is that what, does it look like that there should be less revenue than there? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, the way the graph looks, it looks like water is more expensive in the summertime, but you're saying it's not. It's just the way the graph looks.
Correct. That said, if you're a commercial business, or if you're irrigating, once you hit a certain, there is a graduated rate schedule for water consumption. So it's a flat rate up to a certain amount of water used, and then it becomes a more gradually, kind of like taxes. It becomes more expensive the more you use. So there could be increased revenue for folks that have used more than that flat rate that's allowed. Okay. Or not allowed, but the flat rate for up to a certain CCF.
All right, so it might be more expensive for some people.
Correct. It could be. It depends on how much water you use. I think where you see the biggest impacts is on commercial properties, so not necessarily residential homes. Right. Yeah.
For some entities, not people then.
Right.
Okay, I gotcha. And yeah, amazing. I mean, I can't believe how many people are golfing. They're golfing like mad people. That's $1.5 million of greens fees and shop sales. Is I'm astounded. That's that I guess I shouldn't be astounded. I mean, look at you. You're all culprits. You're keeping the city running. Anyway, thank you, Jamie.
Any other questions by the council? Well, Jamie, I want to thank you and your finance department staff for doing such a comprehensive report, as always. So with that, I will turn it back over to Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Councilmember Baggett. And Councilmember Stearns, the golf course revenues may go down slightly this year because typically in the past, we would actually golf when the ground was frozen. And it's kind of hard to put a tee in the ground unless you find an existing hole or bring a mallet with you to pound the tee in the ground. So we decided not to do that anymore. And especially on the greens when you're putting the ball, and the ball is a certain size and then it fills up with the frost and gets much larger, and then it doesn't fit in the hole. So green fees might be slightly less this winter. Anyway, thank you, Councilmember Baggett. And any other discussion items this evening, Council? Okay, any new business to cover? Very good. Council, thank you very much, everybody, for participating and the presentations. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you again soon. Good night.